tell me if you can relate to this. You just spent, I don't know, an hour or two with your small group. You had the coffee, you opened the Bible, and together you answered every single study question they had. But as the closing prayer came to an end and you began to say your goodbyes and walk to your car, you couldn't help but notice this empty feeling. You love Jesus, you believe the Bible is true, but the conversation that you just had in there, well, it felt like you're wading in a kiddie pool, and you're really starting to wonder if this type of environment is going to offer the soul-stretching biblical growth that you deeply crave. Now, when a tough question was asked to the group, the room, well, it mostly went silent. It felt like everyone was back in middle school. They were terrified to speak up because they didn't want to say the wrong thing or possibly be too much for the group. Now, finally, a brave soul did speak up, but only to give a basic Sunday school answer that wrapped everything up in a neat, shallow bow. Now, maybe you grew up in this thin faith culture and this just feels normal to you. Or maybe you're new to the faith and you think, well, I guess this is just how it is. Or perhaps you've escaped a church that was very charismatic, full of high emotion, but had very little substance. And this quiet group, it kind of feels like a detox at first. But now you're starting to wonder, is this gonna work? Like, I feel really hollow here. It feels like something is really missing. Something is off. Now, the reason your small group, it feels dry, it isn't necessarily the people or the curriculum, it's the goal. You see, we've traded transformation for politeness. Now, think back to the last time that someone was truly honest in that room. Usually the room goes silent. Everyone tends to look at their shoes, and we're so afraid of the mess that we have settled for a version of a community that is safe, scripted, and honestly, very boring. If the goal of those gatherings is simply to just get through the Bible lesson, we will always feel like we're stuck in the kiddie pool. But if the goal is to be known, we have to be willing to get out of the shallow end. Now, I have felt this same way in small groups, which has led me down a personal deep dive study on exactly how the early church operated. Now, what I discovered, it's going to surprise you because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what is missing. And hint, it's not community. What we are looking for is a lost training system. Now I'm going to take you into the raw, the gritty, the reality of the early church to show you 4 specific practices that they had that we now have traded for polite fellowship. Now by the end of this video, you will have a tangible blueprint for how to start rebuilding that depth right where you are. But to get there, we have to start being honest with ourselves. So tell me, when you last sat in a small group, what was that one question that you were actually dying to ask, but you were too afraid that it would make you sound dumb or it would disrupt the current climate of the group? Now, I want this to be a safe place for you. I want you to get your answers. So do not be afraid. Drop them in the comments below. Okay, now let's start with a real conversation. Before we can move past the surface, we have to find the ancient path that actually builds a life of substance. So to understand how we can find that path, we first have to understand why we gather in the first place. You know, one of the biggest surprises in the book of Acts is that Jesus does not just save individuals and then leave them isolated on islands. He saves us by grafting us into a people. You see, salvation, it creates community. It is the Spirit taking dead stones and building them into a living temple. You were never meant to carry the weight of the cross or the weight of your burning questions alone. You see, we don't do these things to go out and to earn God's favor or to feel like we are becoming better Christians. We do them because of what Jesus has already done. The gospel is the news that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, and he took the judgment that we so deserved. He rose from the grave to defeat death, and now he offers us a completely new life. And when we realize that he gave his very life to bring us back to the Father, our only logical response is to give our lives back to him and, of course, to one another. So we aren't just some social club. We are a people bought with blood. And that is the only reason this training system that we're going to talk about has any power at all. But even though that we know that we need community, we often get stuck in a cycle of consumption rather than participation. Now I get it, life is loud between the kids, the job, the constant digital noise that's at our fingertips. Faith often turns into just another thing that's waiting until Sunday for us to consume. Even then, it doesn't typically get its undivided attention because if you're like me, you're guilty of live streaming a service while walking on the treadmill or attending service live, but like creating a grocery list on the side. The word, it shows us a different world. In Acts, it doesn't just describe believers as occasional consumers, it describes them as devoted participants. This sense that something is off in our small groups, it's happening because we have turned the church into a theater and we've turned the small group into a book club. But in Acts 6, when the Greek-speaking widows, when they were being overlooked in the food distribution, the church did not just offer thoughts and prayers. They went and reorganized their entire leadership structure to ensure that no one was missing. That is community. That is where people are actually known, their needs are known, and they are actually met. And they didn't just talk about theology of the poor, they changed their schedules to make sure they could go and feed the poor. So to see how they got there, we have to first look at the primary blueprint in Acts 2. All right, they were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teachings and, of course, to fellowship with one another. They were breaking the bread. They were in constant prayer with one another. Everyone kept feeling a sense of awe. And those who believed, they were together and they had all things in common. And they began coming together and saying, who needs what? And selling their property and selling their possessions. And they were sharing them with one another as if anyone might need them, could have what they needed. They were taking meals to one another with gladness and sincerity of heart. And there were 4 pillars. They were teaching, they were fellowshipping, the table, and prayer. These were not just points on a handout sheet. These were shared rhythms of their everyday common life. Now, for the early church, the first pillar, doctrine, it was not just a hobby for the intellect. It was a shared apprenticeship. Now, when we stop treating the Bible like a textbook and actually start to treat it like a manual for survival, everything changes. The Greek word for teaching is didache. In the ancient world, this was a transfer of a way of life. So by the 2nd and the 3rd centuries, the churches, they took this so seriously that they developed the catechumente. And that is just basically a fancy word for a 3-year apprenticeship. Now, if you wanted to be baptized, you didn't just go and fill out a form. You became an apprentice. And we have an ancient training manual from the early 200s, and it's called the Apostolic Tradition. It shows us just how high the bar was then. And during those 3 years of training, church leaders, they actually closely examined your dealings. They were looking at your business ethics, how you were treating the poor, and whether or not you actually went out and visited the sick. They wanted to know, is the gospel changing your everyday life, or are you just letting it stay as something that you know in your head? Only after 3 years of this life-to-life scrutiny were you then fully brought into the core of the church. Now, if we treated discipleship as a rigorous apprenticeship instead of just a 30-minute casual conversation, how would that transform your heart and your life? That shallow feeling that you're experiencing in small group, it exists because we have made doctrine a hobby for our heads instead of an actual hammer for our lives. We read the word to be informed, while they were reading the word to be formed. This apprenticeship did not just happen in the classroom. It actually happened in people's kitchens. For these believers, the table, that's actually where the forming began. The breaking of bread, it was not a private 30-second ritual with a little wafer. It was the agape feast, the love feast. Early records, like Justin Martyr's first apology, it gives us a window into 155 AD, where they would gather and they would hear memoirs of the apostles and partake in a meal. But immediately after, those who were well-to-do, they would give a common fund used to help the local orphans, the widows, prisoners, refugees. I mean, the table, it rebuilt the church's social fabric. And you could not just sit at the table with a brother and then ignore the fact that his kids were on the other end of it starving. If we open our Bibles to 1 Corinthians 11, it shows us that when the rich ate and the poor were left with nothing, Paul says, they're not eating the Lord's Supper anymore. They're in fact eating judgment. It was that kind of radical commitment that made the gospel undeniable to the culture. Their sacrifice, it created their credibility. And in the early church, sacrifice, it wasn't a program, it was their system. The apologist Tertullian, he wrote that Christians had a monthly chest where they would put small amounts of a deposit of piety. Now, the pagans, they would look at them and they would say, see how well they are loving one another? The early church members were the ones who stayed behind in the cities during the plagues to nurse the dying. They rescued infants from the hilltops where they were left to die. And why does the world today, it rarely says anything about us as Christians now? Honestly, what are we doing for the orphans and the widows and the prisoners and the poor? I'm not sure much of anything. The reason is because we have traded the book of Acts, their pattern, for a modern pattern of what we call therapeutic moralism. We treat God as a cosmic therapist who wants us to be happy and to be comfortable, while the early church, they saw him as king who demanded their very lives. Now, when we drift away from that king, we reach for modern substitutions, and we choose online as a default instead of going house to house and fellowshipping with one another. Or we choose content consumption instead of actual apprenticeship and walking alongside someone in their faith journey. These substitutions are insufficient. They do not produce communal formation. And the primary spiritual practice of, watching a video, yes, you're being informed, but you're not truly being formed because no one is there to hold you accountable. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I'm not a pastor. I can't change my church. I can't change how it operates. And you're absolutely right. But retrieval is not rebellion. It is about repair. Now, when I'm talking about retrieval, I'm not talking about going out there and starting a revolution or being a rebel amongst your group. But I want you to think about it like a home restoration project. If you found yourself a beautiful historic home that has been neglected, where the roof is leaking and the foundation is cracking, you're not just gonna go and burn it all down. You're gonna go back, you're gonna look for those original blueprints. You're gonna see, hey, how is everything supposed to look? How is it supposed to work? And you're gonna retrieve the original version so that you can go back and repair the damage. That is what we're wanting to do in the church. We're not trying to be divisive or act like that we are better than any other, especially not our leaders. We are just simply looking at the original biblical blueprints to see, what we've dropped over the years and what we need to pick back up. We need to bring back the weight of the early church so that we can fix this thinness of our modern experience. You can start building this ecosystem in the quiet corners of your small group in your church today. We can rebuild the 4 devotions as a rule of life. First we can recenter on the table and hospitality and stop focusing on being a good student and actually just start being an honest disciple. Invite someone from your small group to come over this week for just a simple meal and a casual conversation. Ask them, how is your soul? How can I help carry a burden with you? What can I be praying for you about? Now, when someone asks you how you are doing, do not give them the typical Sunday school answer. Give them the Tuesday morning chaos, I'm stressed to the max answer. Be honest with them. Secondly, let's restore accountability. Let's stop being perpetual beginners. Let's ask a friend in the group, hey, I really want to study the deep things of God, and I want you to study them with me. And more importantly, I want you to tell me when my life is mismatched with what we're learning. Will you join me? Will you help hold me accountable? Vulnerability is the only thing that actually breaks the surface tension of a shallow group. If you want deep community, you have to be the one to jump in first. Now, thirdly, we can work on reconstructing the benevolence. So we don't want to just wait for the church fund to act. If someone in your immediate circle is in need, I want you and your household to ask, how might we help meet their needs? Give sacrificially. Make that monthly chest a reality in your own small group budget. And finally, I want you prioritizing prayer. Make prayer a normal response, not the opening and the closing of a ceremony. Reach for the quiet person in the corner of your group. Ask them, how can I pray for you right now? And then go ahead and pray for them on the spot. Enough of this casual, like, oh, I'll be praying for you about that. It's not going to build depth. Our goal is not to look like the first century. It's to go and to recover its formation. The church becomes believable to the watching world only when it becomes habitable for the lonely and the brokenhearted. These are not tips for a better life. They are the soil that the Spirit uses to grow us into the likeness of Jesus. Now, everyone else that is in that room, I'm sure they're tired of being in the kiddie pool too. And they're just waiting for someone brave enough to stand up and to prove that the water is deep and everyone can come and swim. Now, if you are ready for a training, I want to invite you to join me inside of the Narrow Pathfinders. We are a community who wants to move past opinions and into deep biblical practices. This week specifically, I've created an Acts 2 Rhythm Starter Guide to help you audit your own weekly habits. Now, I've posted it inside of our membership community board. Now, even if we were to recover these practices, there's one other problem that we've got to address. In the next video, we're going to talk about the hidden assumptions that we all carry about comfort and about success that are quietly reshaping our faith. This is one you won't want to miss. I'll meet you there.